G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and that you've had a great weekend. I know it is a Sunday, the working week is coming, but 5 days time, we're going to have another week and so enjoy it. So today, as always, we do have a lot to look at. Of course, we've seen those massive explosions again at more Russian ammunition depots. We'll look over that. We'll talk about how important that is, not only the ammo, but now that we're seeing Ukraine with far more success with attacks against these facilities. So we'll talk about that. We'll look at what was blown up. We'll look at the distances. We'll look at what may have been there as well, of course. Then we'll look at the maps. We'll look in the north, the east, and the south. We'll look at some geolocations to line up where those maps are. And of course, today, if you've seen the maps in the Telegram group, come and join. But you've seen that there are a hell of a lot of changes today as well. We have a little bit more talking about victory plans, end of the wars, negotiations, and I want to give my piece on this as well. So, of course, we've had that mass attack, that drone attack overnight, with some speculating that this may have also been force multiplied by Ukrainian sabotage teams on the ground using smaller drones or demolitions as well, in conjunction as another multiplier with domestically produced cruise missiles from Ukraine as well, and some speculating could it actually be we're seeing some of those Western cruise missiles being used but haven't actually then just been announced. So we will look at if that is possible as well. But I think that we'll absolutely see more of these attacks, and these attacks are being done at a very important time, and just in time for when President Volodymyr Zelensky is to present Ukraine's victory plan to the allies, particularly the UK and the US. Now, I did say that there's a lot of messaging recently in the past 8 to 12 weeks about some level of end to the war, a ceasefire, something that floats around this idea. And I said at the time, over the next month, just try and be very aware that this is occurring, because we will see both Ukraine and Russia, if that is where this is going, try and place themselves in the best possible position for negotiations where they are powerful, the most powerful coming to that table. But this is also the time that I said be incredibly cognizant of the increased chances of then having some level of false flag event. So before we look at those explosions, we need to talk about this victory plans, potential false flags, what Russia has said about negotiations, victory plans as well. Now, I won't read all this out to you, but I've posted it up in the Telegram. I've used this before, but this is the list that I work off of when and or why would you have false flag events. And you can just see here that it is to gain then international support. You evoke sympathy, outrage in the international community. You discredit internal opposition, then internal problems that you're diverting away from that, discord amongst allies, or in peace negotiation tactics, perceive aggressiveness to create a sense of urgency for peace talks. So when we're going through this list, you can see why it could be in one or the other country's favour to have an attack like this. And I think it is likely that we may see something like this. Just be aware of it. Justification for war or escalation. So you can escalate there using different weapon systems, demonise the enemy, divert the attention away from internal problems, military failures, and unpopular policy. Provoke a response, a justification for a counterattack. This is something we've spoken about a bit with Russia, that could they provoke a response somewhere through a false flag, therefore to justify dropping some level of weapon system, undermining confidence in the enemy. You undermine the enemy's credibility and sow discord amongst its allies. Of course, if you can sow that in Ukraine away from its allies and those military aid, that can then be a big problem. Confusion, misinformation, but you can severely damage the credibility of the country that carried them out. But as well, main part of this is ally support too, to maybe draw in another country or another group as well. We have spoken about if Ukraine could do something to then more draw in NATO to be involved in this. And I do want to say though, I do think that Russia using a false flag event would maybe have a very limited effect. It would actually be a bit of a boy maybe who cried wolf. So a good example of this is it is overwhelmingly evident that Ukraine and Ukrainians, due to Germany's arrest warrants, conducted the attacks on the Nord Stream pipeline. This is a direct attack against the EU energy supply and NATO countries. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz recently said it cost her over $100 billion to replace that energy system. And realistically, what has come of that? No one has really cared. So what I've said in this and what I'm getting at is a false flag then by the Russians. It will be pinned, I think, back on the Russians anyway, and it may actually have limited further effect. But could we see this to further cement these ideas? And we see this today, and this is released by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the guy that is coming to replace Dmitry Kuleba, who we've spoken about a lot. According to Ukrainian intelligence, Kremlin is preparing strikes on Ukrainian nuclear energy critical objects ahead of winter. And this is some of the areas we have specifically talked about in false flag events. Could it be on Kursk nuclear power plant? Could it be Zap nuclear power plant that Russia launched their own attack to undermine Ukraine? Or vice versa, you have the opposite to then bring in other countries to support Ukraine as well on these. I'm not saying it's going to happen. The intelligence probably is that Russia want to wipe out more energy facilities. But again, just be aware that I believe that this is highly likely that we will see some level like this. So let's talk about the victory plan before we have a look at those explosions. Now, Bloomberg then reports this. Volodymyr Zelensky will push US President Joe Biden to provide an official invitation to NATO and commit a sustained supply of advanced weapons as part of his victory plan. Of course, we have not seen this victory plan yet, but this is the sort of stuff that we thought would be in it. Of course, then a clear pathway to European Union membership, as well as economic and security agreements. He described the plan as a blueprint for how to force Russian President Vladimir Putin to seek peace. So this is the plan that we've heard is it's got to push enough pressure on Russia that then they are coming to the table to seek peace, to withdraw and hand over their officials to then see to international justice as well. How much pressure is that? Well, it would have to be absolutely immense. And I've said without military victories, I don't see how this is going to happen. Kyiv has also worried that a ceasefire without such guarantees would leave Russia free to strike again after rearming. So Ukraine has spoken about if these don't come into place, even if the guns fall silent, and we're not in NATO, we're not in this, we're not in that, 10 years, Russia will just rearm and then they will come back. Now, this continues. Some of Ukraine's supporters are starting to examine options for a negotiated ceasefire. Zelensky has stuck to his earlier position that Ukraine cannot cede territory captured by Russia. Like I've said, I think this has to be then taken back militarily. Zelensky has dialed up his criticism of Ukraine's partners this month over what he sees as their flagging support while Russia has stepped up attacks on the country's energy infrastructure ahead of winter. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, he has said, our job is to put Ukraine in a strong position on the battlefield so they are in a strong position at the negotiating table. This is exactly what I see, that these strikes, these deep strikes, ammo dumps, areas like this is what they're trying to do, is put themselves in the best possible position at that negotiating table. But the question can be asked, is it going to be enough in the next 8 weeks? Well, we'll look at that. Now, official representative of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Maria Zakharovka, has been asked questions and given statements about exactly this, about will Russia be present at then the peace summit, and saying representatives of Russia have not participated in any meetings within the framework of the Bergenstock process and do not intend to participate. So, of course, Bergenstock was that peace conference that we saw then a few months ago. The process itself has nothing to do with the settlement. This is another manifestation of the fraud of the Anglo-Saxons and the Ukrainian puppets, and the so-called Second Summit pursues the same goal to push through the absolutely unviable Zelensky formula, that 10-point peace plan, as an uncontested basis for resolving the conflict, to gain its support from the world majority and on behalf to present Russia with an ultimatum to capitulate. We will not participate in such summits. We are not abandoning the political and diplomatic resolution of the crisis. We're ready to discuss truly serious proposals that take into account the situation on the ground. We've heard Ukrainian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov say, similar to quote him, say the reality on the ground, the emerging geopolitical realities, and the corresponding initiative formulated on June 14th by then President Putin. Of course, this was on the eve of Bergenstock. that we want to take these territories, some of which that Russia do not have presence in. Without Russia taking into account its interests, it is impossible to achieve a fair and sustainable settlement. However, Kyiv and the West do not think about peace. They need war. This is confirmed by the bandit invasion of the Ukrainian armed forces into Kursk and permission by Zelensky requested to strike deep into Russia with long-range NATO weapons. This is a continuation of terror against the population of our country. So realistically, what I'm pulling out of this is, with this victory plan that's going to be presented, I believe, at the end of this week, possibly, we will actually have what that is presented to us. Russia is saying that they have no plans at this point in time to come to the table. Again, it'd be very interesting to see what is in that plan, but what Ukraine's trying to do is put themselves in the best possible scenario, and like Zelensky is saying, to put that much pressure on Russia that they are forced to come to the plan and come to that 10-point peace plan through these strikes, through military actions, through diplomatic actions. Is that possible? Well, I'll leave that then up to you. So let's look over these massive strikes that have then occurred. So the first one we have, that is something else, is out at here. So this is at the Pokrovsk ammo dump. Now, let me show you the explosions first off the bat here, as they are truly impressive, like fireworks display. As you can see, this is typically what you get when you have like a lot of rocket fuel exploding. Now, exactly what is here, that is so difficult to know. And of course, there's massive claims about what was here, but you can hear some of these rockets actually then cooking off in the background as well and firing out. There you go, out there. Now, people are saying that they are North Korean rockets, S-300, S-400 missiles, as well as Tornado S and Tornado G rocket systems, which none of that would surprise me, but exactly do we know exactly what was there? No, we don't. I have one more video for you as well before we have a look at some of the satellite imagery, just to get an idea of how big this explosion actually was. Now, again, to get an idea of how much actually exploded in this and then cooked off after, that is incredibly difficult to know. But the true effect of this will be best calculated due to what effect on the front line we then see. There are massively huge assumptions made about what was blown up and what survived by both sides of the corridor here. What I will say is very few people would actually know what blew up and then what survived, but effect on target, we will see what effect this has had. Give it a few weeks, we'll see what ammo supply effect we're seeing on the front line, and that will give us the best idea. I know I share Tatarigami a lot, but he has a really good statement on this. I don't want to be a downer, but it has to be said, the overall damage to the Russian ammo depots is clearly significant. Clearly it is, based on satellite imagery. However, getting an accurate estimate of the actual volume of destroyed munitions is extremely difficult. My team has been trying to calculate it, but it's nearly impossible to get precise figures. So be careful when using numbers like 30, 50, 70,000 tons. It's tough to verify those estimates, and of course it is. What a lot of people I see are doing are just saying, well, there's no craters, so nothing then actually exploded in large quantities underground. But on the other side, people are going, well, this facility maximum can hold X amount, therefore everything blew up, and it is 50, 60, 70,000 tons. What I'll say is the true effect on target that we'll see is not the fireball. It is if we see ammunition supply shortages and issues at the front line down the track. Now, this is the facility here that then was targeted. So we'll zoom out way out here. Again, we'll measure distance from Ukraine's border itself, about 275 k's. But remember that we have to add on at least, say, another 100 or so kilometers of where these weapon systems have come due to occupied territory. This does come into the fold of some saying that there are drones working in here and targeting specifically, but there may be other reconnaissance sabotage teams much closer in here as well, mix of drones and cruise missiles to have a large effect on target, as well as a lot of this open air storage as well. So let's just flick through a couple of images. We get some idea of some of these weapon systems and munitions. Well, I should say munitions, not weapon systems, but munitions then sitting out in the open, as well as some that are covered as well. Now, one thing, and this is going to sound like cope, and I know people blah, 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 Russia does have an insanely massive amount of old ammunition sitting around areas that is in Soviet times. Now, can that be used? Absolutely. Is that a target. Is that strategically important? Yes, absolutely. How important is it right here, right now on the front line? That is, like I said, the true effect on this is going to be what effect we then see occur on the front. So you can see some of these images of where the fires are burning itself around the base, as well as near then this air base as well. Of course, this is going to be close to the air base to get those munitions straight across onto the airfield, slung underneath planes. Now we have a couple more images here. This is the airbase much closer. This is the Tikhoretsk from satellite imagery as well. So there's at least, multiple areas that have gone up in flames. From these images so far, hard to get an idea exactly what has then exploded. Sorry, I've got one more video I think that I didn't show you here as well, or maybe I did, of then that firework exploding. And then we have this as well, the storage facility. Now, what I really want you guys to look at here is the heavy rail activity along the spur line. So the rail to go from here, pick up the munitions, take them out, or to bring in the munitions and drop them off. And that is important when we look at what Fighter Bomber has said here regarding the latest train warehouse arsenal and ammunition that took off. One thing can be stated now. Today, we cannot protect our ammo depots. Russia's not protecting them. I'll say more. No one can. The Ukrainians blow up such depots every other day. Who is counting them? That is why the ratio was 1 to 12 of ammunition in our favour for the shells flying at the enemy. But that is the Ukrainians, and that is us. Officially, more than 100 drones were shot down overnight. This is shot down. That means more than 100 and a half, so 150 were flying. So again, I've spoken about these drones en masse. You just need to know that some of those are going to be sacrificial to overwhelm. And I would say Russia probably shot down a hell of a lot of drones last night coming at this. But if you can just shoot so many cheaper long-range drones, eventually things are going to start getting through. This is going to be a problem everywhere. It already is, but it is a problem everywhere in the world militarily. They're catching us apparently when loading, unloading trains with ammunition, after which everything else bangs. So this is what I think is very likely here, that they've caught Russia either with ammo out in the open or on trains being unloaded here. So a lot of these facilities underground, the amount of actual bang on a drone is not enough to punch through if these are built correctly, which is questionable as well, but through bunkers. That if you can get it outside, next thing, that just sparks a chain reaction and everything starts blowing up. But one thing I will say is the correct handling of ammunition like this, it should never have enough in one bunker, that if everything goes up in that bunker, it should not be enough to spread to other bunkers. This is, again, if it was made correctly and storage doctrine is followed too. Yes, logic suggests that if it's only drones flying, then the effectiveness of attacks when drones are mixed with false targets and cruise missiles at the same time would increase significantly. Although, where else can it increase? The Ukrainians are doing great as it is. I don't think two warehouses will have significant impact on the course of military operations on a global sense, but if it continues at this pace, then of course it will. So he's saying that right now, maybe not, but if it continues, then it will. Well, it's also clear that it should be understood that warehouses with special warheads of all types, nuclear, submarine berths, and positions of strategic missile forces and strategic aviation can be attacked in the same way. According to the classics, this should be done with missiles with special warheads, but there are options. Now, one thing I will say in this is, we saw Ukrainian drones strike some of those long-range radar systems, and it ended like that, in 2 days, and then it ended. I think the US would have firm words to do not attack strategic missile operational areas here. Of course, we're talking about nuclear weapons, because of course they aren't being used in the war, so that will have no effect. But how will Russia actually respond or see this to do with their own doctrines around the use of these weapons as well? And you would presume they're going to be in more hardened locations. But again, potentially then we will. This is something I've talked about a lot with particularly Chinese weapons. Is there's a lot of conventional nuclear entanglement as well that could really draw back the US from strikes on certain facilities, because there has a strategic weapon there. Can we actually target that? What will then come of this? Of course, this will happen at the moment when Western counterparties consider that the losses from a retaliatory strike will be manageable for the US and Great Britain, because everyone understands the main megatons will fly at them and not only at the Ukrainians. But I hope that before pressing the red button, the last Chinese warning before the whole world plunges into a nuclear apocalypse, there will be a demonstration of intentions in the form of a high-precision strike weighing 1 or 2 megatons at the decision-making centres in Kyiv. And we've heard this a lot, people saying, could you use a smaller kiloton weapon somewhere as a demonstration? And then there would be a, look, we don't want to go further than that. We don't want one going here, going there. And that whole idea of mutually assured destruction. Now, of course, we saw Russia had a failed delivery system yesterday. We saw then they blow up on the ground. We've seen from the craters of that. But we should also say that the last 2 UK tests of the delivery system, potentially for a nuclear warhead, also failed. That said, no one is going to take the risk with the thousands and thousands of deliverable warheads that the US, UK, and Russia have in that mutually assured destruction. Remember, it is mutually then assured. Now, there's another interesting one too. Now, what actually happened here? I don't fucking know. But out just here, just right down to the south of Krasnodar, there has been a former Wagner base light up on fire. Now, an important bit here is we see this Wagner base here. Now, it was a Wagner base for a decade, but then in July 2023, they then left, and it's now being used by the so-called Africa Corps. Not historically maybe the best name, but again, this is basically just a rebranding, a lot of the same guys serving, but only just down to the south. There is actually a Russian military base sitting just down here as well. Let me do some distance. Say 2 kilometers max away down here. Now, many are saying that this has been completely destroyed and this and that. Well, not really by the imagery for this fire. So by what we see is this building, being the one where the pin is dropped, and that has definitely been destroyed by the fire that we then see in this image here. But the rest of this appears not to be. Now, I've seen no one actually claim that this was Ukrainian strikes. Again, it could just be someone using their jet boiler to make cup noodles and it's bloody burnt down. That is, every fire I've ever seen in the army is something to do with cup noodles and jet boilers, but a lot of damage occurred there. Again, we have no real idea beyond this what has actually occurred. At least I haven't seen anything there, but that is interesting, something you need to know as well. And again, it's not too far from where we see that ammo depot that had then catastrophically blown up from Ukrainian strikes either. And will these strikes continue on? We will then see how much effect that is going to have then on the front line. So now let's have a look at the maps. Of course, we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 2022, the purple since 2014. Now there's green and blue. This is showing where Russia has been and has either been pushed out or has withdrawn. The blue in Kursk is area that Ukraine is occupying back into Russia. Red check, blue check means last 24 hours. And we have both red check and blue check on this map today, as well as areas that have moved that don't show any check. Very, very sneaky. Now, let's have a look in Kursk. Now, no changes down on this then western side, although we do have a lot of claims that Russia has got, all the way across here to Sverdlovskovo. Of course, I would need some geolocations and more to show that. There are no Noel report maps updates today, I believe, but this is showing on this map that Ukraine has made more territory today back out to the north of Suja here as well. Again, we'll wait out on anything in here. We want more confirmations, more geolocations, a little bit of everything to get more confirmation in here. So let's move down. And the first place I actually want to come is actually Nevsky. Now, let's have a look at this. Of course, we see red check, meaning that Russia has made territory in here, confirmed by Deep State Map. Further confirmed by, then we have this geolocation sitting right here. So we zoom in on Nevsky itself. Now, hard to get an idea, but I actually believe this is then main road. This is main road. The pin drop is just where my cursor is, just out in here, so in the grey zone. So maybe this should be further forwards. What we then get is this video here of a Russian flag here as well. Now, many people have pointed and go, well, there's no soldiers seen the video. A drone has dropped off this flag and put it there. Now, I think that is unlikely, but someone else brought up and said it would actually be very clever right now if Ukraine made a video with a Russian flag on a drone being dropped off in an area, because then it would confirm that. And then if we see a flag go up without soldiers present, you could say, well, that's just a drone dropping off a flag, therefore hasn't moved into that location. This is all the strategic propaganda parts of war that I actually find very, very interesting. But Russia is definitely, by Deep State, and we'll show you Surak, and that footage has had an advancement in Nevsky. Now we can see this is the Surak map update. He shows this bit of footage, and he shows beyond where this map is out, at least into the grey zone area here as well. Now, where do we want to go then next? So let's just move down the map just a little bit, and we actually do see around Bakhmut some changes. So we actually see this blue here that Ukraine is said to have made back some territory by this map just to the south of Privilia as well here. Now, this is an area where this gets a bit sketchy. This is the Klishkivka through to New York. Now, there are changes in here, but no check shown. So see Klishkivka? Definitely a Russian advancement here shown today, but if I turn on that, there is no then check on the map. Now we'll come down Toretsk, New York front, and we have actually very similar. We see this increase in grey zone, increase out of Druzhba, Dashny as well of red. See this? But if I turn that on, no check on there shown, but saying there is some movement around Klishkivka and New York. Remember, we have a lot of footage as well as other maps showing that Klishkivka has come under control all the way to the canal down in here. Now, we do have a couple of map updates that are very interesting right around this area as well. So let me show you New York. Now, this is hard to get an idea on. Let me see if I can get a better idea. So let's bring this up. So what we're looking at is Toretsky up here. This is New York down the bottom here. This is Leonidivka. This is by this red dot. So Suryak, he is showing that the Russians have made some advancement right up in like a spire out to Leonidivka, right up, sorry, I was on the wrong one, right up into here. During the last 3 days, Russian army secured the children's city here, entered the central micro-district troops, blah, blah, blah. Moreover, during this period, Russian forces advanced along New York, along this river, and entered Leonidivka. So again, I haven't seen footage of that, but that is a very large spire up to there. If true, remember, wait for some geolocations. We'll also wait on further map confirmations of some of these areas as well. Now, we actually have some footage that I wanted to show you just around Toretsky. We can see the amount of damage in here too. And this guy, this Ordaxon X on Twitter, so go and follow him. He has then geolocated a lot of these strikes from the footage I'm about to show you throughout Toretsky. Now, these are Russian artillery strikes in here too. These are Russian shelling Toretsky. But we get a better idea of how it is looking in here and some of these high rises just to give us an idea of the layout of the ground and what then ground forces are or are going to be potentially then fighting through in these areas and the heavy shelling of these high rise areas in Toretsk itself. So as you can see, if we're in then at a minute, what we can do, because he's got these jumped down in here, we can have a look at where some of these further geolocations are in different blocks around where this road is. We get an idea out in here as well. So that is very, very handy to get an idea of where that shelling is and what the fighting is going to look like into the future in these areas. Now let's come down into then the Pokrovsk front, Krasnoyarivka front. So today we do see a large advancement, very large advancement, considering the movements we see typically on this map by Deep State, some 9 kilometers. That said, I think this is putting maybe a week worth of updates in one. I do presume we'll see some of these trickle down, but Hostade itself and then further out even west of here to shown by the Deep State map today of Russian advancement. Remember, about a week ago, we did speak about Hostade likely came under Russian control. Now, interestingly, both these maps, Suryak, Deep State right in here, today now are showing fairly similar except for Russian break-in into Maximilianivka too. But again, fairly similar. Russian took over Seledyovkia, the correctional facility, full control of the locality of Hostre, following the withdrawal of Ukrainian army southwards. Remember, Hostre only shown on grey zone on here, but definitely some large level of advancement has occurred in there, judging by those maps. Now, we come up into Pokrovsk itself and we don't see any changes in here, but I do want to have a look at a geolocation. I do want to show you footage, of course, of that and another map in here. So the geolocation straight off the bat. So we have then the train line down in here. We see these 2 tree lines right in here. Now, this is where the strike against an M2 Bradley, of course, a US IFV given to Ukraine fighting in here. So if you're getting hit by munitions, definitely bloody grey zone. But this is a Russian Kornet anti-tank guided munition. Of course, these Kornets we're seeing, these wreak havoc on the border between Lebanon and Israel as well. Very, very deadly system. Have a range of out to about 8 kilometers. Use like a laser guide on them. It's really interesting. It's like back and forward. But this is an M2 Bradley here. Now, the survivability is really proven in this as well with extra armor on them, and potentially trophy systems as well. And it matters a hell of a lot where these actually strike on the vehicle too. So we see hit there on then the M2 Bradley. Bradley continue moving. Then the same Bradley here as well, then actually gets a second tap from one of these cornets. Massive bang there, that would ring your bell. But we actually do see, credit to the vehicle, we then do actually see the crew dismount the vehicle. Now there is under artillery fire or potentially drones here, but said that the crew had then left here. And we then see further artillery fire too. So I won't say what exactly happened to the crew. I don't know, but it's interesting to see that geolocation, and it's interesting to see the survivability of that vehicle on the front as well. Now let's have a look in Pokrovsk for the geolocation. So let's just zoom out one. Now, the real threat in here is Seledovi by this red, of course, coming up on the flanks and around. Now, down in the south here, just out from Ukrainsk, I do believe this map is now showing more similar to what the Deep State gave us on that update yesterday. But just up here, out of Novohorivka, we do see a further advancement as well out from Marinivka as well. And again, this movement on the flanks, we've talked about Seledovi, of how defensible it is, but the flanks are its large threat here. Russian army took over 95% of Horovka. So, of course, we're talking Horovka up in the north. This is shown by this part of map up in here. And of course, we have Krasny Yar and of course Krytia Yar as well. In addition, Russian forces increased the buffer zone around Novohrivka and captured these areas. The mine encirclement of Seledovi continued developing, Russians taking control over the Seledovskia mine. So, of course, they are a threat there. And we did read through some the other day that said the train line in here, that is a very critical position for further flanking attacks as well. So we can see, we will continue to see how this then evolves over time. Now, let's have a look, because there are a couple that I did miss down here. This is the Nevsky, and then at Peshani, we have spoken about more movement towards Oskil, and we can see today a further Russian advancement in the direction of Kulilivkia as well. So we will continue to see, and we'll continue to see how this updates as we continue. Now, if I do miss any updates in here, I do apologize, and I will show you then tomorrow. But now we're going to get into the areas that are not showing as updated, but there is some speculation about this. So Robotny down in here, I'm going to crack a beer when Robotny finally updates after months. So, and you can hold me to this. So we see this map right in here. Now, this red dot, this is Robotny. We can see these dogleg in the road, and then the dogleg back to the northeast. You can get an idea of how much more territory Syriac is saying in here the Russians have than this map that he's showing, to a minimum. Something more so like this. We'll move that line up to maybe here. That is what he's showing at a minimum. Now, I will say, people ask me why I use Syriac. He is very reliable. You'll see me again and again and again. We see this map update, and I go 2 or 3 days ago, Syriac said X, and it is on par. We have seen a lot of geolocations a lot further out in here too. So wait and see about this. Eventually it will probably trickle through. Now we come up, we haven't seen Stamorsky, Makarivka area move. Of course, this is an area of Ukraine's infamous 2023 counter-offensive in this area here, and that Russia is pushing back on these gains. So the best way is to just have a look at where this river runs. See this turnout in here. Syriac is at least saying that this area is coming under Russian control, and they reach the southern outskirts of Makarivka in here. I haven't seen any geolocations, and we haven't seen these maps move, but look, let's wait and see. Well, actually, we do see a grey zone shift there, so there's definitely been some movement there, definitely some. Wait and see. Now we have one last update in Ugleda. Now we got that geolocated footage yesterday up in around here somewhere, that's moved up a couple of Ks from here, and this has given us a better idea. And this is, it was just shown as this like block, and as well Surik is saying that just further then to the east there was some more Russian advancement there as well. So we'll get an idea of where the maps are moving. We've seen Ukrainian gains, Russian gains, and the front line continues to evolve. So we wait and see. Anyway, legends, I hope. Oh no, I've got one more thing. Sorry. God damn. Now, there is this ongoing thing that somewhat bugs me a lot with everything. There's this overall sort of idea that another Russian mobilization is seen as a good thing for Ukraine. Now, I can see both sides. I can see why people are pushing on this, but I understand that it means that Russia must need more soldiers. Now, this is not only due to losses, but it can also be just due to a lot of rotation as well, and wanting a larger force to have more areas more soldiers to take on more areas or backfill areas too. Rotation, losses, increased offensive operations or defensive operations. But I will say that we also hear this every couple of months. We've heard this for 2 years, that another mobilisation is right on the cusp. And so far, it has seemed that volunteers are definitely keeping up with this. Now, what most people are pointing at in this is a good thing for Ukraine is there's been that many Russian losses that they have to mobilise another couple 100,000 guys, as well as it's going to be far more pressure on the economy. All of which the effect on the economy is true, replacing losses. This is also true to the amount we don't know. But it does seem so far that volunteers have actually been keeping up since that initial mobilisation. Now, what can help volunteers? Well, the attack on Moscow that occurred, the straight up terrorist attack that occurred, of course, then state media directly blamed Ukraine for that. So, of course, that could have helped then volunteers then come and volunteer for this. Drones flying into Moscow, offensives into Kursk. This almost certainly helped recruitment as well. So that's a lot of the reasons keeping up. It can be such a balancing act in this. Now, what I do understand is this puts a large strain on the families and further on the economy. But what it also means on the other side is it could potentially be another 150,000 soldiers entering the battlefield, freshly trained soldiers on rotation, or just increase in numbers, which we've seen Putin announce he wants an increase of numbers as well. And this is already pouring into a war where Russia is currently winning the frontline tactical actions due to having superiority in manpower numbers. And we see on the other side, Ukraine is not mobilising in and conscripting in that 18 to 25 bracket and hasn't announced large mobilisations. So the force on the economy, the force on friends and family that conscription, this is why I don't like conscription, I've talked about this many times, I think is outweighed for a positive for Ukraine by another over 100,000 soldiers that could potentially enter the battlefield or to backfill garrisons around the country so more experienced guys can come in. I don't see further conscription mobilisations as, if we weigh up these, as a net positive for Ukraine. But I'd like to know your opinion, and I'm happy to be wrong. People out there are far smarter than me with far different experiences. Legends, I hope that you have a fantastic day. I hope you've had a great weekend, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.